You can look fit and still be on the wrong track. What if the real predictor of how well you're aging isn't how much you exercise, but how well you function in everyday life? Today, we're talking about the blind spots that could matter most. Stay tuned. Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara, and this is Age Better. Today's episode is about something that I think is going to make a lot of people stop and think. My guest is Scott B. Fulton, author of the new book, which I love, Function, Turn Your Blind Spots into Strengths. Scott is an internationally recognized redefiner in the positive aging space, a researcher, author, and adult educator. He teaches at 3 prominent universities focusing on functional health span and the aging brain, and his courses go out to over 50 college campuses across the U.S. He's a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, sits on the prestigious True Health Initiative Council, and is past president of the National Aging in Place Council. So, in this really terrific book, Scott makes a compelling case that how well we function in everyday life may be one of the clearest ways to understand how well we're actually aging. He focuses on 5 domains of physical and cognitive function, and the book includes simple self-assessments, which you can do right at home, like I've been doing, designed to help people see where they're strong, where they're vulnerable, and what they can do about it. You know, your blind spots. And this really got my attention. Scott argues that fitness alone does not necessarily tell the full story. In fact, one of the ideas at the heart of this book is that your health span may be shaped less by your strongest area than by your weakest one, your blind spot. He also points to everyday markers like walking speed, stair climbing, balance, and reaction time as meaningful predictors of future decline, disability, and even mortality. This matters because so many of us think we're doing all the right things to age better, walking, working out, eating better, trying to stay strong, but we may not actually know whether we're building the kind of function that protects our independence, mobility, and quality of life over time. And that's exactly what we're getting into today. Okay, everyone, get ready to age better. Hey, Scott, welcome to Age Better.
Well, hello, Barbara. It is such a treat to be with you today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
We had the best time. We were together on a panel, a virtual panel, so we didn't meet in real life, but we had a really good time. And it was then that I learned about your really terrific book, and which we're going to be talking about today, Function, Turn Your Blind Spots into Strength. And I just thought that was fascinating. And as it turns out, it's like all these great tests that you can do a self-assessment on where you are physically and functionally. And I just am fascinated by this. So I was really excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, the book has lit up a lot of lights, you could say, for people. It's been pretty exciting.
Yeah. I mean, as I told you before we started recording, that I love testing myself. I have the Oura Ring. I have my Apple Watch. I like to see how many steps, what my metabolism is, blah, blah, blah. So your book was really speaking to me and my interest in self-assessing. And I'm also really big on something I call reassessing and tweaking.
Sure, absolutely.
Which is what your book indicates.
Yep, for sure.
Like, hey, if you're weak in one area, you can figure out how to get stronger in that area. So let's talk about the big picture. So what do you mean by function, the name of your book, and why do you believe it might be one of the most important metrics for just knowing how you're aging?
Sure. So when we think about function, what we're really talking about is health activity in terms of our ability to do activities, whatever they are. And that exercise would be one, but the activity of just going up a flight of stairs. And so that's ultimately how everyone defines health span.
So it's really like how you live real life.
Yeah, it's everyday life. Doesn't matter what your marathon time is. That's interesting, perhaps, but it's really around how do you go about daily life? And then what does that mean in terms of health span, which is the thing we all care about a lot more than longevity. And it just happens to be, as I started to dig into the data, there's more data on this than all of the other biomarkers and all the other things that we've been hearing the buzz about over recent years. Because this data has been measured for over the last 50 years on over 700,000 people. But for some reason, no one thought to bring it to the mainstream healthy market to say, how are you guys doing? And are you on track? And yeah, because there's a lot here that we can measure quite reliably.
Yeah, not only bring it to the mainstream and to people like me, the layperson, but also bringing it all together. I mean, I've had experts on the show talking about just grip strength, for
Right.
example. I've had experts talking about just VO2 max and so on and so forth. But this book brings it together, which I find fascinating. So in your book, Function, you write, fitness can coexist with frailty. Think about that. Fitness can coexist with frailty. That stopped me. Function cannot. That is a very powerful line. What do you mean by that? And really, what's the difference between function and fitness?
Right. So that's really what I think is a stopper for a lot of people because they assume that they're the same thing, and they are clearly not. So function is really your ability to go about daily life and do all the things that daily life demands. As soon as you say fitness, we're now starting to look at subsets of certain things. Whatever, could be a sport. You could be great at pickleball, which is going to come with certain functional attributes by playing pickleball, but it's going to be missing some other things. And so when we think about function, it's a much more holistic view to say across these domains, what I'm sure we're going to talk about, is that you have strength across all fields. And so you could flip it to disease and say, well, just because you have one particular strength, we'll say you have no heart disease and I'm 75. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah, it's
But
good.
that doesn't mean there isn't anything else going wrong. And we just don't tend to think about function and fitness in that way.
Yeah, really interesting. And in your book, Function, and the subtitle is Turn Your Blind Spots into Strengths. I really like that. I was intrigued by blind spots. So really for you, a blind spot is you, as you were just saying, you could think you're so healthy, you're maybe not on any medications, maybe your heart is great, but yet you may have some blind spots that you're just not aware of. And that's the purpose of this kind of self-assessment and your book. Talk to us about that. What do you mean by blind spots?
Right. So I think everyone recognizes we all have strengths and weaknesses, but we talk about it in a very generic way without really defining what those actually are. And so that's what function does, is it starts to break them into these 5 domains. And the idea is, again, we'll go back and say, I like to use runners or cyclists because they kind of are common sports. That
Right.
they have very good lower body strength, very good cardiovascular systems, those 2 examples. But at the same time, they may have very weak balance. They may have very weak flexibility. And so if we step back now and don't get hung up on any of those sports, but just kind of think about where you have 5 different streams all working together, what's going to cause the failure? Is it going to be the strong one? No, it's always going to be the weak link. And so the example would be the cyclist who is very powerful, has very high VO2 max, but has very weak balance. And so they fall over at something that they never thought about because they're so locked in on the bike. The bike doesn't do much to train their balance at all. So it's really finding out what's that weak link that's essentially putting all your good attributes at risk.
Yep. Thank you for explaining that. In your book and in your philosophy about all of this, you've broken it all down into 5 different distinct domains. Can you talk us through each one?
Right. So I've alluded to a couple already. The first one is strength and power. And I think most people get the idea that's force over and the time you can do something, not just one event, but you need to do it for some period of time.
Give us an example of that.
Right. So we'll say in the gym, an example, and someone wants to do, we'll say a deadlift or whatever, or one arm curls, whatever. So if you could do one 40-pound curl, we'll say, for example. Well, if you can only do one, that's really a peak strength or peak power. In life, we need to be able to do things in a repeated pattern. So how many reps can you do of 20 pounds is far more meaningful than what you can do once. So that's really the ability to distribute power over a period of time, because we're on our feet many hours a day, doing things many hours a day. So that's really the strength and power piece. Going up 3 flights of stairs, right, versus just one. Perfect example, right? We need power to be able to do that and strength. They work together. And then the cardiovascular piece is, essentially what we think about the heart and lungs, the ability to deliver oxygen and nutrients to the muscles that we've
Is
been
that
working on
VO2
building.
max?
So VO2 max really works on both of those, but it's defined in its pure sense as cardiorespiratory strength, the ability to deliver oxygen to the muscle and then convert that into power. So those two work together. And that's really the only reason VO2 max is such an interesting marker, is because it covers 2 domains of the 5. Most of the others really just cover one. So that's really the only reason it stands out. And it's an important run. I don't mean to belittle it, but it's still very limited in its own view. So the third one I've alluded to again is mobility and balance. And so this would be the example of, kind of use the runner now, who's a very good runner. And the story of a woman just a couple of days ago was out running, quite a solid runner. I think she's probably in her 60s, and then tripped on the path with some, I don't know, it was a root on the whatever in the pavement or something, right? Just a little thing that was enough to throw her off her feet and tumble and broke a bone. And so it's not simply that it happened, right? One was, as good a runner as she was, her mobility was off enough and her balance wasn't able to recover. But now she's going to have quite a setback to have to come back. And that's, as we think about in life, what changes is the do-overs, the recovery. Those opportunities start to get taken away from us. And so those start to really matter more now than they ever did. The fourth one is flexibility and structure. And that's the simple things like bending over to tie our shoes. Can we still do that? And if we like the idea of slip-on shoes, okay, but every time we do that, we're missing an opportunity to work on our flexibility. And so we start to lose it if we don't work on it. And structure is that ability. Can we stand up straight? Can we sit up straight? Or and muscle imbalance, if we only do a certain amount of type of strength activities, we'll get muscle imbalance that might look good in the mirror, but ultimately are going to cause us to get some misalignment in our skeletal structure. And then the fifth one, which people tend to forget about when we talk about function, it's neuromotor and cognition. So here we're talking about really, again, 2 pieces. Neuromotor is the ability to deliver a signal to a muscle to do a certain action. So we see, why do we get slower as we get older? The signal going to the muscle starts to slow down. That relay starts to slow down. And then the other part is what's going on in terms of the neural signaling in the brain that's now starting to take longer, perhaps. And so what are the things we can do about neural signaling? Not simply dementia, but just how can we really start to build that up? And that's the piece I think I'm quite excited about. And that's really in the book, ultimately where we lead you to, because you need the physical piece as the bottom or the foundation for it to really tap into the cognitive opportunity that's there.
So of all of those domains, which ones do you think really get overlooked the most by everyday people in midlife and beyond?
I think cognition gets overlooked because we take it for granted, but I'll say, what's the one, that as soon as they hear it's at risk or being taken away? I've got a new course coming out, goes out across the country next month, and we had to close it. So it goes out through Northwestern, across to over 50 campuses around the country. We had to close it at 309 students. And Johns Hopkins reached out to me, said, can you do one just for us in the fall? And it's all around cognition. It's called A Beautiful Brain. And it's this idea of what are the things that we can do for our brain that are everyday activities that we can build into daily life. So that's ultimately, I found with working with adults over the years, that's the one they really kind of want to lean into, because take that away and it's a really tough slog for everybody.
I agree with you. I think that people really don't focus on it. But quite frankly, I think that all of those domains need to be focused on if we're going to age better. I mean, I believe
Yeah,
that in my heart of heart, every single one of them. But I could see where that one would get overlooked. So one of the most useful parts of your book, I thought, is that it helps people assess themselves at home. I
right.
mean, with very little equipment. I mean, a few things. I think that getting assessed professionally, having to go to a place might be a barrier for a lot of people. There could be a cost. Of course, there will be. And you have to go there to be able, with your great instruction that you give in your book, to do it yourself. Talk to us about that.
I never intended to write this book. It had to be written once I discovered the data because I realized this is so accessible. Why have we not, we as in we'll call it a medical professional community, made this available to the general public? The answer is there isn't enough money in it for anybody, is the simple answer, right?
Yeah, follow the money, right?
Yeah. But it really is an accessible way. So what I did was I didn't make up any of the tests. I said, what's within that realm of testing? And that's largely within physiotherapy and cognitive therapy in terms of people doing those assessments every day who've been doing them for decades. What are the tests where there's a lot of data, like hundreds of thousands of data points with people, and longitudinal where we followed the same people over decades?
And you reference that in your book too, which
Yeah.
I like. I like seeing the science behind what's being recommended to me.
And then take all that data, put it in a format that's really easy to understand that people can quickly use and say, like something like a walking test, go walk a mile and time yourself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I could now find out at the end of that mile, where do I stand relative to my sex and age? No one has ever given us any information like that. Even physiotherapists, one of the physiotherapy companies in the country reached out to me and said, we're changing our whole intake strategy now after reading Function because we realize we don't provide people with that information. That should be basic information. People want to know where they stand, and we haven't been telling them. So if you could go walk a mile and then find out, well, what speed am I? Am I on track for the health span that I'm hoping for? Like I'm doing stuff in the gym, I'm eating right. Instantly you'll know. And instantly you'll decide, is that something I should work on or no?
And is that what you would call a blind spot? Like you might think, oh my goodness, of course I'm going to ace this test. And then you find out, well, no, it's a weak spot. It's a blind spot for me. But then you kind of show ways that you can improve it.
Right. So the walking is a great example because you could say, well, I walk 7 days a week. But what you'll find out is, well, I've been walking, but I haven't really been focused on really the speed. And ultimately, walking speed is far more important than steps because speed indicates a cardiovascular capacity and a strength capacity that steps never does. And then what do? They just naturally start to walk a little faster and they retest themselves and like, okay, that wasn't so hard. And so now they just follow those patterns, not doing anything new. They're just bringing a little bit more intention to what they were doing already is really the common approach to all these tests.
Yeah. And it's also very motivating, I think. I mean, again, I like to test myself because I like to beat myself. When I run a race, I'm a marathoner, I've run 17 marathons at this point, all since 50. Hoping to run the New York City Marathon again this year. And I don't compete with others. I compete with myself.
Of course.
It's like in all ways, like speed, but of course I've gotten a little slower now, but in other ways. And I think that that's very important for people here too. They compete with themselves, but also, of course, their numbers are being compared to a kind of a standard, as you pointed out, which you do have in your book. So you know where you stand for your sex and your age, which is so important. Where do things like stair climbing, balance, lower body power, reaction time, super important. Like you mentioned, that person who fell while running, like that could have been part of the way she reacted to the fall itself, to whatever she tripped on. And cognition, it all fits into this conversation. All of this is important for aging well, right?
Right. It's all interdependent. None of these, and I think that's again what I'm pushing back against, all of this mono advice around this slice around grip strength or whatever the latest thing, the latest fad of what you need to be doing, all of it, it's too much of any one thing because it's always at the exclusion of other things. The example I like to give, and again, I come from the data, not from the world of, yes, like you, I like to run and things, but I come from the world of what does the data say? And if we looked at older adults, which I do all the time, you would imagine that the over 90 population is dominated by fitness freaks and diet freaks. Are they? No.
Nope.
That should tell us something, right?
Yep.
Intuitively, that should be a red flag to say, I think we know it, but no one really raises it up. And so that's really when we say, no, you just need to be good at the basic stuff. That's like getting too specialized in any one thing is setting yourself up for failure because inevitably you will have a weak link. So it really is, you want to be a truly holistically strong individual across all 5 domains.
Yeah. I mean, I really believe that just like your PCP, if you go for your annual physical, yeah, sure, you should be weighed. But we all know that weight and BMI specifically is really not all that useful. We have other better ways of measuring one's body, like the waist, which we know is useful because of the visceral fat and so on and so forth. I've talked about that a lot. And I really think that every single PCP and other doctors should read this book and should recommend it to their patients and should even just recommend in general, you should really assess yourself with some of these things, be able to talk about it. But nobody does. First of all, they don't have enough time when we get that. So it's a whole big, another discussion, as we would say.
Well, I'll tell you it's coming because a number of doctors have asked for it. That they want a scaled down version that they can implement because they can actually bill for all this. And it's a great way to get patient engagement now because they don't have to handhold the patient to do these things. So yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's part of lifestyle medicine. I think we'll probably be the first to adopt it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Hopefully will become a movement. So let's talk about functional age. You talk about functional age in your book. And of course, we've heard about chronological age, which of course, that's what we are. And then biological age. Talk to us about functional age vis-a-vis these others.
Sure. So if I take we'll just go back to walking speed, for example. Okay, so if we think about walking speed and we take a woman, we'll say the woman is 60 years old and she has the 1 mile walk test. And she does that 1 mile walk in 14 minutes and 21 seconds. That tells us she's at the 75th percentile, which is a great number to be at. That's what I recommend as a target. But if I also say now, well, where's the median? Where's the average person? The average person is 10 years, in terms of that speed, is 10 years younger. So it's 14, 18, almost the same speed. So they're walking at the speed of someone who's 50 years old. So their functional age is 50, even though their chronological age is 60. It's pretty simple math. Simple tables just to look to see where they are. And so that's really, when we see people that move more youthful in their movement, this is just a way of measuring it and being able to actually verify it.
Got it. Okay. And what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they focus too much on some of the popular metrics that are out there right now that we've mentioned a few, like calories burned, steps taken, even if they're looking at their VO2 max on their Apple Watches like I do, whatever it is, instead of focusing on function?
There's a lot of gadgets that are for sale. That's, we're always, the measure is I use, if somebody's advertising it, you probably don't need it. Because we wouldn't need advertising to find the things we want and need. I think the way I look at it is to say, what would you need when you're 90? Decide what you're going to need when you're 90. And you may or may not still be marathoning at age 90, but I'm willing to bet on the list of priorities, it's not going to be where it was when you started to do your first one at 50 and showed up at the first line. So it's really the things that are less fitness focused and much more function focused. Like I still want to be living independently. I want to still be able to dress myself. That requires standing on one leg. I want to be able to bend over and put my socks on. These all seem like trivial things until they're at risk of being taken away. And so those are the little investments that we make now along the way that ultimately the whole point of the book is to give you a trajectory to find out where are you now and are you on a trajectory that will get you to where you want to go? Because all of those things we talk about at, say, age 90 are what we call the activities of daily living. They all have threshold values. And so that's what defines health span. And your trajectory tells you, am I on track to get to where I want to be at the age that I'm planning on?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about aging better. And I agree with you. You mentioned you want to be independent. I want to be independent, mobile. I don't want to be frail. I think frailty is something we all should work very hard at avoiding, which now brings me to my next question about falls. Where do falls, I mean, again, we'll go back to your friend or colleague who did fall while she was running. Where do falls fall into this about functional living? And how can we help ourselves?
Yeah, I take this on pretty aggressively when I talk about falls because we pay a lot of lip service to it, right? We
Yeah,
tell
it can
people don't
change
fall,
everything.
right? But we don't really give them information. So if you kind of look at what's happening as we age, so there's really three things that are happening. And the first one most are familiar with is sarcopenia. We're getting weaker, we're losing muscle mass, and we're trying to do strength training. And we're giving people the sense of that's going to be enough. Okay. Or we're saying the bubble wrap, you just get rid of all the barriers and make sure you have no trip hazards in the house. And fair enough, except living in bubble wrap means we're not going to be living life and doing a lot of things we want to do. The other two things that are really important here are bone density and balance. So when we think about osteoporosis creeping up, that and loss of balance both converge at the same point. And then really that is when the fall happens. The balance is the initiator. And now the fall that would have happened a decade ago and been that was embarrassing, now becomes a broken hip. And now suddenly risk of mortality in the next year has gone up to probably about 30%, only a 25% likelihood of ever returning to live independently after age 65.
Right.
Serious consequences for people. So I think when I think about falls, these are the investments we're really making around freedom that will essentially prevent us from falling. And if we do have a fall, it's going to be far less severe.
Yeah. Of course, anytime when I talk with a guest about falls, preventing falls and what can happen and osteoporosis, I think about my own mother who did fall. She was living independently in her own home, and she did fall in 2018 and broke her hip and had emergency surgery, never returned home, had to spend the remaining 2.5 years, that's all she lived afterward, in assisted living, and then health declined, cognitive functioning declined. It was so traumatic for all of us. And she did pass away 2.5 years later. And I was already on a journey to healthy aging and better aging. I was already there writing books and talking about it, but that really, really made me, and I told the story so many times as a cautionary tale to people that you must take this seriously. You must take this seriously.
I just this week posted a video on a 61-year-old woman who turned around, reversed her osteoporosis in 16 months. It is a powerful video for women
Oh,
to see.
I would like to add that link into
Yeah.
the show notes for everyone to see. How did she do that? How did she do it, if you can share?
So it was a combination. So she also started HRT a
Okay.
little bit later than traditionally people thought, but she has no heart
She was
disease.
still in that window of opportunity, as we
Now
call it,
she pushes
where
the
she was
envelope.
able.
She's a PhD organic chemist. She's a pretty smart woman to figure things out and is able to get what she wants when she knows what's appropriate. So she was able to work with a physician and find people to work with, and did the Liftmore protocol in terms of heel drops and deadlifts and things. So she really went at it. So she had a DEXA scan that was get measured, is one of the first things. That's consistent with everything in function. Find out whether you have an issue, and then what would be the things to do. So that combination, she also looked at her protein intake and her calcium intake and started to monitor those closely. But yeah, the remarkable change in her numbers in just 16 months.
It is possible. And what's so really wonderful and exciting, and I'm very connected to the bone health field because I've been on the board of the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation
Okay, sure.
for 10 years. And now I oversee our marathon teams and do other projects with them. But so I'm very connected to them. And I think I'm really on top of the newest research. And what's very exciting is that it's only in recent years that we know and understand that there are lifestyle things that you can do that can actually slow bone loss, stop bone loss, and in some cases, as you just pointed out, reverse bone loss without medication, without the medication of the bone medication, not HRT in this case. And it's fascinating. And it's specifically lifting heavy. I mean, it's the lift more. And everyone, I have put that link into the show notes for several episodes I've done with guests who focus on bone health.
Sure.
But I will put it in again because it's very interesting, the Lift More study. So I will add that in for sure. And so if someone discovers a weak link, like whether, fill in the blank, balance, mobility, whatever it is, what should they do first? I mean, is it the kind of thing, because we never want to overwhelm people or else what happens.
Sure.
They put that proverbial blanket over the head and they do nothing. I mean, for me, I'm just telling you what I think and what I have been doing is I've just been going through the book and doing each test to see where I am. But you please tell us.
Right. And so you're naturally curious, which
Yes.
I think a lot of people are, which is why they've kind of leaned into this. And you can do it quietly on your own without, having to pay and all the issues of getting organized to have someone else do something that you could do yourself. So at the end of each test are usually 2 or 3 tips around what you could do. But there's also, I think, more important, it becomes self-evident because a lot of these things are just applying a bit more intention to daily life. I'll use the walking example. As soon as you realize, well, you don't need me to tell you to walk faster. It is so self-evident because you realize, well, let me go try the next walk and see if I could do a little bit better time because now I know it's important. And wow, I did. I have had this happen over and over and over again. So people naturally self-correct once they know because it's everyday life of things they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel in your own life just by going about your day where you might be having a blind spot or like climbing up the stairs might be a little more challenging now than it used to be, for example.
And one I like, and the CEO was the first one to come to me with this one, the relatively young CEO. I shared something about what are called chair stands. So how many times can you do that in 30 seconds? Right. So if we could look at
Meaning
that one.
when standing.
From a chair
Correct.
to stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down. How many times can you do that in 30 seconds, which is in the book by percentile and by age? But you need to do that without hand assistance.
Yeah.
And he said, I didn't realize I was using my hands. Well, I don't need to because the idea is you want to use every movement as an opportunity to preserve lower body strength. And so he's became very conscious afterwards to say, I've stopped using my hands. And yeah, I can, because there's a balance component that works into it too. So all these little things, you realize it's just a habit that you develop and I need to adjust my habit. I don't need to do anything new. I just need to bring a little bit more awareness and attention to it.
Exactly. And you mentioned he's younger. He's not midlife, if I caught that correctly. And I think this program, also your book and all of the self-assessment tests and the tips that you give to improve them is not just for people who are in my age range, midlife, 50s, 60s, and so on. It's really for every age. Everybody should, again, as we said earlier in this conversation, it's the whole idea of reassessing and tweaking throughout your life. Your body changes. It just does. It does, everyone. Whatever
And
age
that's
you are.
the idea.
You might be in your 50s right now. I was once in my 50s too. And then I thought, yeah, this is it. Yeah, I'm like strength training. I'm running marathons, eating protein, blah, blah, blah. And this is it. My body will be like this forever. No, that's not true.
Right.
And so you have to reassess and tweak. Scott, this was a great conversation. I love your book, Function. Everyone, there will be links to Function, get more information about that, more information about Scott, everything he's doing, including on YouTube. It'll all be in the show notes. So definitely check this out and really get the book. Get the book and do the test so you know where you are, so you know what your blind spots and your weaknesses are. But before I let you go, Scott, what are your 3 biggest takeaways that you really want everyone to remember, because we covered so much?
Well, and actually came from when you primed me with some questions. And I think this is one of the latest realizations that I had from my research since writing the book was 60% of our health span is attributed to function. Only 40% of it is associated with disease.
Incredible.
That's not what we're hearing out there. I think that's really important. So it's really that discovering where you are now once you kind of get that in context and how meaningful it is. This is not a random thing.
No, I just want to stop you. I couldn't agree more, because we always think of, heart disease and cancer and everything like that. I hear you, but you're saying that 60% is because of function.
60%. Disease only accounts for 40%.
Incredible.
The two are intermingled
Sure.
along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. But yeah, like it's so discounted because all we hear about is disease when we're aging. And then I think the other that while in the book it talks about measurement, and so if you think it's all about measurement, no, it's really very little measurement. It really quickly transfers to intention. You will just naturally start to walk fast. You'll naturally start to put a little bit more effort into getting up without your hands. Things that you just didn't think mattered, you'll now understand they matter, and you'll just naturally do it. I've seen that happen time and time again. And I think the other, regardless of what age you are, the earlier you start, the longer health span you will get as a result. And you'll be able to now know where you are, but also know where you're going. It's been a delight to prepare this book for people, and the reaction has been nothing short of astounding. And I'm just so happy that people are finding value in it.
And reacting to it the way they are. Really, congratulations on this book. It really was needed. And we can't always say that about new books that come out, even great books that come out. They give us great information. Was it needed? No, it's a great book, but
Right.
This was necessary to bring it all together. And I really thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you, Barbara. It has been wonderful to have this conversation with you, because you clearly are invested in it yourself, so you really can relate to it.
Yeah, thank you so very, very much for joining me today. I know you'll be back. And everyone, thank you for tuning in. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Age Better Podcast, please do a few things. First, share it with all your friends and family. Then, subscribe to Age Better wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Finally, if you have ideas for topics you want me to cover in a future episode of Age Better, send an email to agebetterpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.